We will be starting the session in the next minute, inshallah. All right, everyone, let's officially begin. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Maaz and I'd like to welcome you all to the seminar, to the session on international funding and scholarship. First of all, thank you so much to everyone who's here on Zoom and this late at night, and then everyone who's also watching us on YouTube Live. I'd like to thank you all, and just the fact that you're here, just the fact that you're here on a session for international scholarships while you're in your university days tells me that you have that belief that this might be something that's possible for you. And this is always something that's step number one. और अगर ये step नहीं होता आपके पास तो it's a problem, because all of those people that are not here, or all of those people that don't attend such seminars and sessions during their college days, during their university days, they're those that end up believing that they can't do it because they don't even try and see how it's like. So good job at that. Moving on, I'd like to thank the two guys that helped me organize this session. The first one is Wasim Muzammil, and the second one is Danish. Both of them were an amazing help throughout the entire session. They helped organize, and I'm really grateful to both of them to help put this through. Um, I'll tell before I start into the session, just some housekeeping items. This would be a bilingual session. तो अगर आपने उर्दू में बात करनी है, if you want to ask questions in Urdu or English, you're more than welcome in either language. We won't have a limit. I'll try to keep it in English as much as possible, ताकि if there are any international people watching later on YouTube, they can also understand this process, because I do have like people and friends from other countries who are also interested in this funding opportunity and this funding process. So let's begin. Also, just the last thing, as I mentioned before, for everyone who's watching us on YouTube Live, you're requested to comment and comment in the YouTube Live, and try to do it towards the end mostly, because that's when I'll be going through the comments in YouTube Live, and any relevant comment, any relevant question about the session, I would be answering those. For everyone who's here on YouTube Live, congratulations. You guys were selected from about 450 applicants, 450 people who had signed in for the session. And you guys were the people who had the most relevant questions and seemed the most interested about this learning about this funding opportunity. So good job at that. The way you would ask questions is, as I mentioned before, just use the raise your hand function in Zoom, and usko use karke you can ask your questions, and I will call your name out, and that's when you're allowed to unmute your mic. Otherwise, it is requested that you guys keep your mic muted, so that the least amount of disturbance is caused throughout the session. So let's begin. Let me tell you guys how I'll be conducting this session and what the whole and overall picture is for the session. So initially, I'll just be telling you guys a little bit about me. Why are you even listening to me? Why is this even important? And then I'll be telling you guys how this session came about. हमने ये session रखा कैसे, क्यों क्यों रख रहे हैं, and then I'll be talking to you guys about the funding process. Funding process क्या होता है, and that'll be the main part of the session. And then I'll be moving on to the second last part, which is इस funding process में what are your priorities? आपकी क्या priorities होनी चाहिए that you can actually use to focus on to maximize your chances for getting this funding, this scholarship. And then lastly, obviously, as we mentioned before, we would have a Q&A session. So I guess let's just dive right into it. The first part is just a little bit about me before we, actually get to the main part. About 3 years ago, in 2018, I was sitting in the same place that you are right now. I was doing a bachelor's in civil engineering from UT Lahore, and I graduated in 2018 from UET. And so basically, the point of this is to tell you, okay, I was in the same shoes that you're at right now, just 3 years ago. And then after that, I applied for various schools. I went through this funding process, and after waiting and after doing some internships, I was able to get a scholarship in Auburn University, and that is something that I'll also be screen sharing with you guys. Just give me a second. So I hope you can see my screen share right now. So this would give you, as soon as you can see my screen, this would give you a brief idea about my profile. So after that, I gave the GRE, I gave the TOEFL exams, और उसके बाद GRE or TOEFL exam देने के बाद, I was able to, apply for several schools. And after applying for several schools, I was able to get admissions in 8 out of the 10 schools that I applied into, and that's being shown in my acceptances. And I was able to get a fully funded scholarship from Auburn University. And I was also, the process was also ongoing for the fully funding opportunity in Georgia Tech, which I was really proud of. And I was also able to get some partial funding from other schools like NYU and stuff. So that's just a little bit about that. And then obviously, I ended up choosing Auburn for my master's because I wanted to go for the building construction or construction management program. And then so I joined the program in May 2019. And then I graduated from the program in August of 2020. And then after that, I moved to Los Angeles, California to start a full-time job. And I've been here ever since. So that's a little bit about me and basically a little bit about my story. And then let's talk about how this session even came about. Hum session kyun kare? And the way this started was, as I mentioned, Danish and Wasu before. Danish was someone who reached out to me, like, over the years, a lot of people have reached out to me and been like, Maaz bhai, guide us about this process. Hame bataye ki process kaise hota hai? Like, what is this about? Is this something that we can do? And then so I spent some time guiding him. And then when I spent that time, to Danish कहता है Maaz bhai, and I talked about this to some of my friends in my class, और उन्होंने कहा हमें भी guidance चाहिए. तो and they're like, पहले 2 थे, फिर 4-5 हो गए, तो उन्होंने कहा एक session रख लेते हैं. तो उन्होंने कहा हमें class का session रख लेते हैं. So first it was just about one class, and then we were like, okay, we're just doing it for one class. Why don't we do it? Why are we just doing it for the mechanical department? Why don't we do it department wide? So we decided to go for 3rd and 4th year department wide. And then once it was 3rd and 4th year, we were like, we should also add the 1st and 2nd year people. So right now we have people from the 1st year, 2nd year, 3rd year, and 4th year. We also have people who are doing masters in UT. We also have people who are doing PhDs and MPhil degrees. So it was a really good turnout. So that's basically how we started. And the reason why we're doing this is obviously, if this is some knowledge that I spent 3 to 4 years of my university life and after that gaining, I don't want to just keep it within me. I want to help with my time and with my resources. If I can help any one of you improve the quality of your life and get to a better place in life, so that would be my honor. So that's the only basic reason that I'm doing this, to help you guys out with the time and the knowledge that I have. So that was just the initial part. Let's dive right into it. And as I mentioned before, try to keep your background as professional in the video, because this is being shown live on YouTube. And also, if you have any questions, just use the raise your hand function in Zoom, and I take your question from that. So let's move on to what the funding process actually is. And so before I start what it is, let me just give a brief disclaimer. This funding process is mostly applicable to the United States, to United Kingdom, UK, to the United States, Canada, some parts of UK, and Australia in the most part. This is also applicable to places all around the world, like Korea. There are people that go with this in China, in Thailand, like different parts, because this is pretty holistic. So, ये जो process मैं आपको बताऊंगा, it would touch everything, like all those places, but mostly this is applicable in US, it's applicable in Canada and in Australia. So what is this funding process? These are basically, and you guys, some of you might have heard about this, these are assistantships. And so what are assistantships? Basically, they're full tuition fundings. Aapki tuition is 100% covered, and they also give you a living stipend. And what that living stipend does is it covers your living expenses and any other expenses that you may have. It covers your rent, it covers your food, and you're also, depending on the university and the program that you go to, it also covers, you're also able to like save some money to pay for any other thing, depending on, how much funding you get, and what's your school like, what's their policy like. So that's the number one thing, just training, just going right there, it's assistantships. Now, there are three kinds of assistantships. In this session, we'll be mainly covering two. The first one is, and again, I haven't mentioned this before, like, and if you guys want to take notes, you're more than welcome. If you have any questions, write them down, ask them towards the end, and I'd be more than happy to take them. Even if you have any questions in the meantime, I'd be more than happy to entertain those as well. So the first one is research assistantship, the second one is teaching assistantships, and the third one are graduate assistantships. And in this session, I'll be mostly focusing on research and teaching assistantships. Graduate assistantships एक ऐसी चीज होती है that vary from university to university, and their policies vary from department to department. So that's not something that I'll be covering. And also that's very case-based to obtain. Usually when internationals go for, say in the US like me, or they go to, Canada, Australia, or all these other countries, they go for either a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship. So I guess one of the first things, Joke, if you talk to anyone about US scholarships, for example, सबसे पहले जो दिमाग में ख्याल आता है, at least for Pakistani students, is Fulbright. We know about Fulbright. Fulbright is a US scholarship that a lot of you probably have heard about. And I guess the first part that in the process that I wanted to cover was how are assistantships compared to Fulbright, and what's the comparison like? And when I'm giving you these insights, basically I'm giving it through my experience and through the experiences of other people that I met and asked these questions from. And so this is basically combined experience from several people that went abroad and went for scholarships and stuff. So basically, the thing about Fulbright is, the best thing about it is that once you get in, once you're selected, every single expense is covered in the Fulbright scholarship. And that includes your air tickets, that includes your health insurance, anything that you'll have to pay in the US is covered for 2 years for your master program or your PhD program in Fulbright. The issue with Fulbright is that there is no choice of, if you want to stay in the US and work after, and learn about, say, for example, I did a building construction or construction management degree. Theory both per thi, we read a lot of books, but how is it applied actually in the field? You can only learn that if you do a job or try it out. And so basically, and Mohammed Qasim, I'll get to your question in a bit. Let me just finish this point. The way assistantships are different is that in an assistantship, your tuition's covered, your living stipend is covered. What is not covered are usually your air tickets. That's something you have to pay out of your pocket. Your GRE and your TOEFL fees are also not covered. That's something that you have to pay out of your pocket. But the biggest chunk of that's your tuition fees, those are covered. Aapko health insurance from me, you always get, you mostly get discounts or some sort of a waiver in the health insurance as well. So basically you're able to cover everything. If you can cover your GRE and TOEFL fees or get a scholarship for that, which is basically about 30 to 40,000 rupees, about $205 currently, I think, for each of the exams, then if you can cover that and your air ticket to the US, to Canada, wherever you're going, everything else is covered. Why is this something that I prefer more? Why are assistantships that I actually tell students to go for? And why did I personally not apply for Fulbright? Was because once you graduate, आपके पास F1 visa मिलता है आपको, which is a student visa, when you're on an assistantship. And in that assistantship, basically, you get to choose whether you want to stay in the US, stay in Canada, or wherever for the next 1 to 3 years on an optional practical training program. And you can work there in your field of interest, in your field that you got your master's or a PhD for. And the reason why it's so important is because all those people that come for Fulbright, the good thing about them is that their funding's covered. The bad thing about them is also that their funding is covered. What that means is unki funding covered hoti hai, they don't have to worry about any fees in those 2 years. But as soon as they go back to Pakistan and they haven't planned anything, and wahan jate hain to aapko 30,000 20,000 ki naukri mil rahi hoti, 40,000 50,000, depending on your field. और वहाँ पर आपको यूएस में फुल ब्राइट में आपको 2 लाख 3 लाख 4 लाख हर महीना मिल रहा था. So ये इस चीज़ के लिए लोग रेडी नहीं होते. As compared to if you come to an assistantship and you get done with your program, on average throughout the US in all different states, on an average starting salary आपकी होती है about before tax $5,000 a month. So compare that to, coming back to Pakistan and working here, and compare that. And it doesn't mean that you have to stay in the US. It doesn't mean that you have to stay in Canada after you come here and work. What that means is you come here, get your master's, get your PhD, work for 1 to 3 years on the OPT program, get experience. And if you want, you can use that, you can go back to your country and use that. Or if you want, you can choose to stay depending on what your priorities are and what you want to do in life. So that's why I personally feel that assistantships are better, because it gives you a much better opportunity to choose what you want to do in your life rather than being forced to move back even though you don't have any plans. Mohammed Qasim, you had a question. I think you raised your hand. Aapka question tha, you can unmute yourself.
First of all, assalamu alaikum, Maaz bhai. Luckily, I have a contact with Danish bhai, who told me about the session. The session is going very well, but I have a question regarding the universities. How we rate the universities either in USA or in Australia, if we want to go there. कि हमारा जो सब्जेक्ट है, फॉर एग्जांपल मैं अभी मैकेट्रॉनिक्स इंजीनियरिंग कर रहा हूँ यूटी लाहौर से, 2019 मेरा सेशन है. तो हम कैसे किसी भी यूनिवर्सिटी को रेट करें कि हमें यहाँ पे जाना चाहिए या यहाँ पे अप्लाई करना चाहिए? देन फिर मतलब पहले यूनिवर्सिटी में अप्लाई करना पड़ेगा, फिर उधर स्कॉलरशिप में अप्लाई करना पड़ेगा ना, जो वो ऑफर कर रहे हैं. तो इसके ऊपर
Right. So that's a really good question. And that's something that comes across. और जब मैं आपको अभी process समझा रहा हूँ ना, इसके अंदर भी ये आएगा. And once आपको एक process पता चल जाए, that's when I'll tell you कि यार how do you even select universities and how do you even choose universities, कैसे उनके ranking आप देखते हो. So wait towards the end and inshallah this answer will come through.
all right.
So let's move on to the process or the timeline for applying for these assistantships. And this is the main part. And this is where a lot of people mess up. And this is where I personally messed up as well. And this ends up costing people gap years or extra years to go for this process. क्योंकि उनको timeline का नहीं अंदाजा होता. So the first step is you need to understand कि fall admissions होते हैं and spring admissions होते हैं. And the most funding usually, and the most students that come into graduate programs, be it masters or PhDs, अक्सर लोग आते हैं in the fall admission. Fall admissions कब होते? For fall admissions, which is something obviously that you want to apply for, is around December. So it starts from October. कुछ का October में होता है, कुछ का November में होता है, but for the most part it's in December, and it goes up till February, March, and even April for some schools. So that's basically the overall timeline. Ab fall में आप लोगों ने अगर apply करना है, if that's what you're aiming for, because that's where the most funding are for research and teaching as well, you want to make sure you apply for early admission deadlines. Now, early admission deadlines, why are they important? Because the most funding that's given out is given out in the early admission deadlines and not in deadlines that are, say, late admissions, right? So as internationals, you want to be prepared to apply for early admission deadlines and apply for the fall semester every year so that, you can maximize your chances of getting the research or teaching assistantship. So that's the deadline. I keep the December deadline in mind. Say, for example, 15 December, say, is the deadline for the university that you're applying to. Now, 2 months before that, 2 महीने पहले उससे, you need to start preparing your statement of purpose का draft, and you need to start gathering your letter of references, and you need to start obviously with that completing your application. So you need to give a 2 months buffer before December, जहाँ पर आप अपने SOP, LORs, letter of references, and you're working on your application. So that's the buffer that you need to do. So in your mind, you need to have an idea of, okay, October 15th is when I'm going to start that. Now, 2 weeks before October 15th, what that means is October 1st, say, you want to start preparing for your TOEFL exam, ताकि you can give 2 weeks to the preparation of the TOEFL exam, and then from that, you can give the exam by October 15th. What that means is, and this can be TOEFL या अक्सर आप लोगों ने सुना होगा IELTS exam का पता होता है लोगों को. You can give either or, लेकिन ये चीज़ ज़हन में रखो कि जो TOEFL exam it's more applicable in the US and Canada. IELTS is more applicable in the UK and Australia. So based on where you're applying to, I would recommend give IELTS and TOEFL accordingly. I personally gave the TOEFL exam, and I thought it was a pretty easy exam. एक हफ्ते में 2 हफ्ते में आपकी तैयारी हो जाती है. And the second thing, so now we're at October 1st, जब आपने TOEFL की तैयारी start करनी है. That's where we are at in the timeline. And this is something that you guys should be making notes of. Now, 2.5 to 3 months before October, you need to start preparing for your GRE. So GRE exam के लिए आपके फिर जो date बनती है, वो बनती है about somewhere around July 1st, July 15th, July के महीने के अंदर. You need to start preparing for your GRE exam. Abhi, today is July the 17th. So this is the right time if someone's looking to apply for fall this year. This is the right time to start the process and to start giving your GRE, preparing for your GRE. उसको आप अच्छे से 2 महीने दो, 2.5 महीने दो, and then you start going from there. So what's important is GRE के one thing that everyone needs to keep in mind is that don't usually the average preparation time for the GRE is 2 months to anywhere between 4 months. And the ideal time is about 2.5 to 3 months. And the reason why this is important is because I have seen people score amazing scores. I'm talking about 330 and plus, which is 2 months of preparation. And I've seen people score good with 4 months of preparation. But as soon as you start going past 4 months, there are people that get anxious and वो 5 महीने लगाते हैं, 6, 7, 8. The more time that you spend on it, the more burnt out you get, और आपके scores भी you'll start seeing कि आपके mock tests में they start declining as soon as you go past that 3.5, 4 months mark. So it's better to keep your time and your preparation limited to that. And so that's the overall timeline इस सब के लिए. And one myth that I would like to clear right here, एक चीज मतलब कि अक्सर लोगों को ख्याल आता है if they see someone speaking in English, उनको ये आता है यार, and this is a myth that I've heard so many times in UET, और मेरे भी जहन में ये चीज होती थी, यार मेरी तो इंग्लिश इतनी अच्छी है, I'll get a scholarship easily, कोई मसला नहीं है यार, this shouldn't be a problem. But when I came into the process, जब मैं उसके अंदर घुसा तो मुझे अंदाजा हुआ कि मेरी इंग्लिश का almost कोई फायदा नहीं है. As long as you can communicate का मतलब होता है प्रोफेसर बोल रहा है आपको समझ आ रही है इंग्लिश में, and as long as you can talk and he can understand, does not matter if your accent is not perfect, you're applicable for this. And UT के अंदर about 99% of the people that I know of, even if they're from villages, they can speak English and they can understand, and they can communicate through that. So that's something that that's a myth that everyone should take out of their mind. Speaking English has a big role in getting scholarship, which it's not the case. And when I'll get to the priorities, आपको समझ आ जाएगी कि TOEFL exam की actual importance कितनी होती है. And the last thing in the process and the timeline is, so this is the way to apply to a university. Mohammad Qasim ne question पूछा था about university कैसे select करते हैं, I'll get to that. But this is the way to apply to a university. How do you apply for the funding? जिसकी हम बात कर रहे थे, हमने research और teaching assistantship की बात की थी. And the way to do that is, जब आप application भर रहे होते हो for teaching assistantship, almost all applications have a checkbox for graduate teaching assistantships. और उसको अगर आप टिक कर दो, सिर्फ उस पर आप क्लिक कर लो, तो आपका क्या होता है, आपकी जो प्रोफाइल है, if you get admitted into the university, they rank your profile with other applicants, and उसमें से जो top profiles होती हैं, 1, 2, 3, how many ever, depending on how many teaching assistantships the department is willing to offer, उसमें वो आपको फिर teaching assistantship देते हैं. So that's something कि you don't really have a lot of control over. For example, if you talk about me, I was afraid कि यार मेरा teaching assistantship तो मुझे मिलेगी नहीं because I had a 3.0, 3.1 CGPA. I was like, there will be people with CGPAs of like 4. I'll probably not get it. But once you apply, you realize कि आपकी पूरी application matter करती है, not just your GPA and all these things. So that's the way to apply for a graduate teaching assistantship. You just have to tick a box and you get considered for that. And in teaching assistantships, basically what the work जो work काम होता है आपका teaching और research में, उसमें मैं भी आता हूँ. Research में assistantship का बता दूं. The way you get research assistantships is you reach out to professors in the department of the university that you're applying to. So whatever university that you're applying to, for example, say you're applying to University of Washington, right? Or New York University, whatever. You go into the civil engineering department, if that's what your department is, and you go look at the professors and look at their profile, or just field में आपने research करनी है, you basically look at the professors, read their profile, read their research interest, and write emails to them introducing about who you are and telling them about what your research has been throughout your bachelor's or your master's degree before that, and how that you're interested to work for them for if they have any research assistantship opportunity, that you're willing to work for them if they will consider you for that. And so the way, when do you do this? When do you reach out to professors? As soon as they apply, as soon as they send their applications in. So for example, you send your application in December 15th. December 16th, say you should start reaching out to professors in the department of your university. For PhD applicants, जो master's leading to PhD पे जा रहे हैं, in the US you can go straight for a 5-year PhD program from your bachelor's degree as well if you have good research. It's actually easier to get PhD funding and research assistantships as compared to master's assistantships. So अगर मैं अपना timeline बताऊं तो I was able to get PhD fundings and PhD offers from professors about 6 months before any professor even considered me for a master's funding. And the reason is because PhD may, in the US at least, about 90 to 95% of the programs are fully funded because PhDs are research intensive program और आपको 5 साल के लिए उनके लिए काम करना पड़ता है in the research and they pay for your PhD program. Masters it's harder because it's just 2 years, and so it's harder to get scholarships and it takes more work and more time to get master's scholarships. So for PhD applicants, I would not ask them to send in the application first. I would ask them to reach out to professors first and get the funding secured. And then once the funding is secured, आपको professor कहता है, yes, like I like you, I like the research that you've done. That is when you actually, जब आपको professor कहता है, so that he can ask you to apply in the spring intake. He can ask you to apply in the summer intake. But for PhD applicants, your supervisor and your funding is the most important thing, and they should apply and they should reach out to professors for RA opportunities before they send in the applications. So are there any other questions other than what Qasim Salim asked about how to select universities right now before I go into what the priorities are, different priorities आपकी क्या होनी चाहिए, GPA कितना matter करता है? I know a lot of you have that question. Research कितनी matter करती है and all these things. Are there any questions right now? I see Ali Hassan's hand raised up. Ali Hassan, if you want to ask your question.
Okay, so I wanted to ask this thing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to ask this, that most of the universities for master's program, they say that the teaching assistantship or research assistantship is not applicable to the master's students, or it's not that much funded. For example, I applied to Brown University and they did accept me, but they accepted me as a self-funded student. And when I looked for the TA opportunities and research assistant opportunities, so they told me that the research assistant opportunities are like really not for the master's program, and the TA opportunity that only pays like $2,500 per semester. So that's something that like I'm confused about.
Right.
If you'd like to
tell
me
sure.
something about that.
That's actually a good question. So Brown University, that's an Ivy League school, right?
Yeah.
So something that you should, I personally do not recommend people applying in Ivy League schools. मुझे नहीं पता था Ivy League schools क्या होते हैं, but when I looked into it, I realized these are, I used to think they're like the top 10 schools in any program, and that's why they're called Ivy Leagues. That's not the case. It's these group of 8 private research universities that actually got together actually for athletics and football, and that's why they're called Ivy League. And so because they have Harvard in there and they have other good schools like Yale and Columbia, so people start thinking, okay, oh, these are the top schools, but that's not the case. For example, MIT and Stanford and UC Berkeley, all these really good schools, these are like the top schools in Georgia Tech, for example, in civil engineering. They're not Ivy League programs. And but they are research programs. So basically, I don't recommend people to apply to Ivy League schools. The reason is usually people that go into Ivy League schools are politicians, very rich people, affluent people. They have presidents as their alumni. So basically, there's so many people that are willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get their kid into an Ivy League program. Why would they want to pay someone from Pakistan to get him into the Ivy League program and pay him to come here? So basically, Ivy League schools rarely offer funding opportunities. They do. I'm not saying they don't, like for PhD, they do. But it's ideal that you don't apply for Ivy League schools. Rather, you apply for high research funding schools. And this also comes into Qasim Salim's question about, okay, how do you select universities? Because you're aiming for research assistantships, and when you're putting your application in, you're also going to tick the teaching assistantship box. The way you select universities is, one, you look at your GRE score and you look at your overall profile and you look at your research profile. And once you have all that in mind, आपकी एक application तैयार होगी, that's when you rank the universities. And say every university, and I'll get to more details about this later, but the way you select them is based on how much research funding is that department, say civil department in MIT, kitni funding unke paas, how much research funding do they have, how much does Stanford have, how much does University of Washington have, how much does University of Missouri have, for example. And the reason why this is important is because the more research funding that a university's department has, the more chances are there that that funding will trickle down from the PhD department to the master's department as well. So that's why you want to focus on not Ivy League schools. You want to focus on research on US News. US News up. You can go to the website. I think you have to pay an initial small fees to get like the latest access. The previous access is also available free sometimes on their website, and you can use that list to see, okay, in civil department in the US, what's the ranking of different schools, how much funding do they have in civil department, how much, for example, and other details, what's the cost and stuff like that. So basically that's how you go about that. I hope that answers your question, Ali.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So then we get into the Q&A session, and once we get done with the priorities, I'll also while you guys are getting your questions ready, I'll also look at the YouTube live and see if there are any comments there, any questions that are relevant, and I can address those as well. And so let's get to the priorities. What are the priorities? What are the things that you got to focus on? Do you have to focus on joining a football club to get a research assistantship? Do you have to focus on I don't know, reading a lot of books? What do you have to do? So the number one thing that's the most important to get research and teaching assistantships and to get yourself funding for either a master's or a PhD program, the number one most important thing is research. And in UET, sadly, in the bachelor's level, not a lot of research is done, but you need to understand that every year in every department, there are students जो first year में आते हैं, second year में आते हैं, their mindset is set that they want to get a foreign funding, they want to get master's scholarships or PhD scholarships. So they ask professors, they go to professors and ask them, hey, is there any research project that you're working on? I'm interested in your field. Can I work with you on a research project? Can we do anything? And so research is the most important thing. And again, like if you have any questions about research or about any other previous things that I mentioned, write them down and you can ask towards the end. That's the number one most important thing. The second thing is not your GPA, it's your GRE score. So the GRE score is something that trumps your GPA, and a lot of people don't know about this. And if you have a low GPA like I did, I had a 3.0, a 3.1 CGPA. In my sixth semester, I had gotten a 2.4 GPA. So if you have a low GPA like me, and then I was able to obviously cover that in my final semester with a really good GPA. But if you have a low GPA, if you have a 3.0 or even a 2.7, 2.6, your GRE score is something that can trump that. And remember, the GRE exam and the TOEFL exams, and this is also some myth that I want to clear out. These are not exams that test how well you will do in your master's or PhD program. ये आपकी टेस्ट नहीं करते आप रिसर्च कितनी अच्छी करोगे, ये टेस्ट नहीं करते आप कितने अच्छे स्टूडेंट रहोगे. What they basically test is how well can you give these exams. If I'll give an example to explain this. So basically, I used to hear about Chinese and Indian and students from other countries that would get best scores in the GRE and TOEFL exams. Like in the GRE, they would score 340 out of 340, full scores in perfect scores in math and English. They would come to the US, the professor would meet them, and they would hardly be able to say a sentence in English. Like they would struggle speaking, for example. And they would have really good TOEFL scores, like test of English as a foreign language. And the reason why this happens is because, जैसे मैंने start में कहा था, even if you can speak amazingly well, it does not matter. What the GRE and the TOEFL exams test is how well are you preparing. Was if you can mute your mic. Okay. How well are you preparing for these exams, and how well do you give these exams? So that's all they're testing. And keep in mind, even US students struggle with the GRE exam, not because the GRE exam is very hard. The reason why they struggle is because GRE ke English portion mein and also math portion, the questions that are used, especially in the English part and the vocabulary that are used, you almost never use it in everyday speaking. So I've given the GRE, I had to memorize like 1,000, 1,500 words, and learn how to use them. But rarely in the past 3 years of my university life, of my life here in the US, I've ever had to use them. And so even US students struggle with that because they have to memorize new and hard English words. So don't think it's easy for US people. Don't think it's hard for us. If you prepare for it, if you understand how the test is given, you can really ace it. So that's the second thing. Number one, research. Number two, most important, GRE score. Number three, your statement of purpose. That's, in my opinion, and this is not educational advice that I'm giving. This is not like legal advice. This is just basically my opinion and my experience, how I've gone through all of this. So the third thing is statement of purpose. That's again linked to your research as well, because in your statement of purpose, you will be mentioning about your research projects and things like that as well. Excuse me. So after the research, GRE and SOP, the fourth most important thing is your GPA. And I matter. What you need to understand is GPA matters. Countries, I can't say about China and other countries, but at least in these countries, it just matters to get you in and to get you above the cutoff level. And Qasim, I'll take your question in a bit. And so what that means is, for example, these top schools like MIT, like Stanford, like Georgia Tech, how was I even able to apply for these schools even though I had a GPA of 3.1, a CGPA of 3.1? The reason why I was able to apply is because the way they use their GPA in their applications is that they use it as a cutoff. So for example, in the top schools that these are, the GPA cutoff was 3.0. So anyone who had a GPA greater than 3.0, they would take those applications and they would consider them. Anyone that had a GPA lesser than 3.0 in the top schools of the world, they would ignore them. Now, if you come to like more like less like lower ranked schools, for example, like Auburn, the GPA requirement for Auburn or the cutoff was 2.5. So even someone with a 2.6 CGPA or a 2.55 CGPA can send his application in and have such amazing research and such a good GRE score that it covers for his GPA lack, and he can actually get fully funded opportunities even with the less than 3 GPA, जो कि आपको नहीं लोग बताते, professors don't know about this, like other people don't know about this, but that's how the GPA is considered. And then there are schools that consider 2.0 and plus, and it depends on the ranking of the school. But personally, I don't think I've seen more than like maybe one school that had a requirement of a 3.5 or plus GPA. Generally, UT mein, when I would talk to people and professors, they would say, oh, Maaz, you can't get a scholarship, you can't get funding because, you need a GPA of 3.5 and plus. I didn't have that, but that's not the case. That's not true. So that's the fourth most important thing. You need to be above the GPA cutoff, and that's all that matters. If you have a good GPA, great. If you don't, you need to compensate that with your research and with your GRE preparation. The fifth most important thing, and this is the second last thing, is the test of English as a foreign language, TOEFL, IELTS exam, and your letter of references. Your letter of references don't matter as much as people think they matter. And this is someone जो कि NYU and different universities के admission committee ने आके, they had a session with USCFP Pakistan, Informal Christian College, and over there with US, I think Education USA is the consultancy over there that also takes the GRE exam. They were there and they told us, if you have a really good profile and everything's great and you have to give 3 letter of references, if one or two of those professors don't say bad things about you, or they say this person was not good and this person was really we don't like him as a student for your application. So the admission committee is going to look at your GRE score, they're going to look at your overall profile, your statement of purpose, and they're going to judge based on that. And even if professors are saying bad things about you in letter of references, they're weighted very less in the overall application spectrum, even though other people might tell you so. ये यूएस के graduate schools के admission committee आके हमें बात बता रही थी, and I didn't know this until they told me. Obviously, still try to get good letter of references from professors, have a good relationship with professors, and try to always do good and ethical work, but don't fret on it too much. Don't worry about it too much. I think there was a question. Was there any question that I missed? Qasim, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Yes, I have two queries now. The first one is how much the SOP matters after a good an average GPA or a good GRE. And the second question is how to write a perfect SOP. As you have mentioned, in the SOP, we should write about our research. But after the graduation, like after BSc, we are applying for the MSc and we don't have a research program there. So can we skip that part in our SOP?
So if you haven't done, so I'll get to, if you've graduated from UET and you haven't done research, what are some of the things that you can do? And I'll also get to SOP. What's the things that are most important in writing an SOP? And I'll get to that as well in a second. And I'll get to Ali Hassan's question as well. But I just want to finish the priority topic, and then let's move on to the Q&A sessions once and for all. So what are the priorities? Let me reiterate. Number 1, research. Number 2, GRE score. Number 3, statement of purpose. Number 4, GPA cutoff. Number 5, TOEFL exam and IELTS exam and letter of references. And the last thing that a lot of people don't mention, there's something that I think is important, are your extracurriculars. In your university life, what did you do with your free time? Did you spend it watching Netflix? Did you spend it hoogling around and going on bike trips or whatever and wasting your time? Did you spend it cooped up in your room, or did you go do extracurricular activities? Did you go do debates? Did you play sports? Did you use your time effectively? And this is something that people don't really think that matters, but overall universities yes, we want a educationally and academically sound person, but we are also looking for a good person that has other aspects to his life as well. He might play sports, he might play music, he might do something else. He might be doing internships or involved with other projects in NGOs. So have a holistic profile and do some extracurricular in your university life. And this is the most important for people in their first year, in their second year, and their third year. If you've graduated already, it's a different case. But if you're still in your college life, involve yourself, force yourself into those, because that helps you groom, that helps you grow, and that exposes you to more things. So that's the priority list. And I think I've spoken enough for now. We'll get straight to the Q&A session. And to start it off, I'll go with Qasim Salim's question, then I'll ask Ali Hassan for his question, and I'll go to the YouTube live. And if anyone else has questions, you can write them down. So Qasim, to answer your question about statement of purpose, how do you draft that? You need to understand that in that statement of purpose, you're telling the admission committee and the professors that actually might pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for your master's or PhD. You're telling them the kind of person you are. And you're also telling them about your academic accomplishments. You're also telling them about your research work that you did. And the reason why research is so important when you're writing a SOP and you're trying to tell professors about your research is because, one, bachelor's may, even if you have done research in your undergrad program, you might not have had enough time to publish papers, right? And if you haven't had enough time to publish any conference paper or a journal paper in the research because it takes time, the professor needs to know, okay, yeah, I'm getting this person for a research assistantship. I'll make him do research. He'll do research with me. And then he'll have to write about that research. And I might also have to ask him to publish that research with me in my master's or PhD program. So basically, from your statement of purpose, he's trying to see whether you can write research quality linguistics. Do you have the language? Do you have the typing skills? Do you have the writing skills to write about research? That's what a professor is looking for. Other, if you don't have any research paper, if you have a published research paper, for example, which is hard to find in undergrad, but some very few people do. I did not personally have any research publication. The professor can read that research publication and see, yes, like this person, say Qasim, this person was able to write a paper and people peer reviewed it, and he has good writing skills. I would want him to come do research for me, and I know he can write well. But if you don't have a paper, for example, if you don't have a research article or a journal, then you are requested to work and spend your time in your SOP crafting it and drafting it to basically tell your professors and people that are looking to fund you and people that want research students, professors that want research students, that I can write and I can write research quality material. So about 1/3 or about almost about half of your SOP in that case would be about your research work and stuff that you've done. To answer your second question about, okay, I've graduated, I haven't done any research, what do you do? If you're in your final year, then almost, and you haven't done any research and you're looking to get an RA-ship, before you start applying, I would recommend go back to your professors, even if you're doing a job, go back to your professors and try to start a part-time project, research project with your professor. Spend a year, spend a half year doing some research with a professor so that you can write about that research to your professor in the emails and in your statement of purpose, because that is the most important thing. You're basically selling the work that you've done before that. You're telling them, hey, this is the work that I've done before that. It is linked to your field of interest, the one that you're researching on right now. Can you please consider me for an RA opportunity? And so that's the way I would recommend you go about that. Alias, and your hands raised. Do you have a question?
Okay, so basically I have three questions. The first one is that what should be the ideal length of our statement of purpose? Because sometimes the school clearly tells you the guide how to write the SOP and like what exactly is required. But sometimes they simply say that a statement of purpose or letter of interest is required of this much length. Sometimes they don't even specify that. So my first question is like how much the length should be and what should be the like follow up, like you should start with yourself or where should it exactly start, because that's the most important or most difficult part with the statement of purpose. And the second thing is how shall we like approach the professor to ask him about the research assistant opportunities that he or she has. And the last thing, that if we apply for the master's leading to PhD programs, so as you mentioned earlier, that we have to approach a professor before applying. So how does that process carry out? Because you have to be like very sound professional while you're trying to contact a professor for showing your interest in his or her research field. So if you can please tell a bit about that.
Right. So I'll cover your third question first, and then I'll move on to your first question. And then I'll ask you to repeat your second question because I think I missed that.
Sure.
The third question about how do you reach out to professors, right? The way you do that is once you've done some level of research, half a year, 1 year, say if you're in your third year, you start doing research in your third year until your final year, now you're applying, say you have a year and a half of research experience, ya jitna bhi aapne kaam kiya, right? The way you do that is in that email, what you need to understand is especially if you're going for a PhD program, you're telling that professor, hey, I know you fund professors, you fund students for research. I'm actually looking to be funded. Can you consider me? So basically you're asking him for about 100 to 200 to 300,000 dollars in the period of 3 to 5 years. That's the amount of money that you're asking of him in that email. So why am I mentioning this? The reason I'm mentioning this is because your email needs to be crafted in a way that the professor can tell, yes, this person is actually serious, and this email that he has written and this time that he has spent writing that email, this actually justifies that I give this person 100, 200, 300,000 dollars. I have the money. I'm looking for someone. This is the person that I'm willing to consider. Now, keep in mind, one thing that I should have mentioned in the session is that in the US at least, the research funding that professors get mostly are from two places. One are from the National Science Foundation or from the government, grants from the government, research funding from the government, and two is from private industry, private companies. And almost every other professor has hundreds thousands of dollars to millions of dollars in research funding. And the thing that a lot of us don't understand when we're sitting in Pakistan is that, or like other countries in the world, is that professors in the US and and Canada and all these places, a lot of times they have research funding, they have hundreds of thousands of dollars, they don't have people to give it to. Because students in the US, a normal student, why would he want to work in research with a professor for $1,500 a month in his summer or $2,000 a month when he can go do an internship in a company and get $3,000 a month, $3,500 a month? Why would he come to a professor and say, okay, I'll work for you and I'll do research for you, and it's not easy work and I'll get paid less? So usually professors, unless professors like in a really reputed university, in a really high ranking university, and a lot of people know about him, it's really hard. It's hard for a professor to find the right candidate to fund for a PhD or a master's. So professors usually are always looking. What we don't understand in Pakistan is what kind of a professor is looking for a research assistantship. And the way you do that is you go to their research profile on their department page and you see the list of papers that they're published. Usually you'll see, okay, he published 3 papers to 4 papers in 2017. He published 5 papers in 2018. 3 papers in 2019, 6 papers in 2020. What that tells you, a professor, he doesn't have enough time to do all that research himself. He'll get grants. Uska kaam hota hai ki he gets the funding, and then he hires masters and PhD students underneath him to do the work for him. So you can see from those research articles in those years, and you can actually tell, okay, a professor is regularly funding students and he's regularly looking for students because students graduate bhi hote rehte hain saath. So the way you type that email, ek cheez dhyan mein honi chahiye, you're asking him for that much amount of money, so your email should say that. The second thing I would say, the way you write it down is like you don't want to make it too long, 10 pages long, okay, professor, can't even read it. You don't want to make it 2 lines, 3 lines, okay, professor, okay, yaar, this person's not even interested. You want to make it 3-4 paragraphs. Start with a brief introduction, start with the work that you've done in the research, start with what are the research projects of his that you're interested in from the past. What are some of the things that you would be willing to work with him in the future? And basically you're trying to sell yourself in that email, sell your work in that email. So that's basically the idea of writing a good research email. And you have to spend weeks on that because it's a lot that you're asking of that. And it takes time. Like every single day, it'll take 2 hours, 3 hours to draft an email, to look for professors and do all that after you've applied. So that's the third question. The first question was, it was about your statement of purpose, right? I think I've covered that. Yes. What was your second question then?
Yeah. You're asking about my second question?
Right.
So I was asking that, like, the same way, how to approach the professors when you have applied for the master's for the research assistantship opportunity.
Right. So I think it's the same thing, right? Go to the website, go to the department website, see a list of professors, see the research interest. Geotech mein hai, to geotech ki kis field mein hai? Are they in seismic activities? Are they in I don't know, soil testing? Like, what's their research interest? And then go from there. I was, for example, in construction management, I was looking into BIM, building information modeling. I was looking into in geotechnical engineering, I was looking into ground improvement done. So basically that's how you decide on a professor. It ideally should match the research interest that some research work that you've done in your past. Before I move on to the next questions, I would mention in the US and like all these Western countries, sometimes we think that, and I used to think that because I'm in civil engineering, I cannot apply for a master's in, say, computer software engineering or computer science, and that is not true. Um, if you even if you have a bachelor's in civil engineering and you're interested in computer science or computer software engineering and you want to move to that, the way you do that is you need to have some level of work, some interest shown by internships, by any volunteer activities, by something that you did throughout your time that proves that yes, this person is interested in this field. And then basically in your statement of purpose, you just write down why you're interested in that field, what is the kind of work that you'd be looking to doing. And in most cases, they're more than happy to accept people from different programs. And the example of this is in my program in building construction, in construction management in Auburn, we had people from geological engineering, we had people from bachelor's in business administration, from marketing, from finance. We had people from basically different fields. We had architects, we had like different fields, lawyers coming together and basically pursuing that. And they're pretty good in accepting applicants, from different fields as well. It is harder to get funding if you don't have prior work in that field. Just a heads up on that. So I'll be moving to. So yeah, just raise your hands for the questions that you want to ask. I'll be looking at some of the questions in the YouTube live to see if we have any relevant questions over there.
Masvi, I have filtered the question on YouTube Live. There are very few, so I've sent you. Just check out the group. Okay, you'll find the one.
So there's a question, would you recommend self-finance to go to a university and pursue scholarships and opportunities from there? That is actually a very good question. So this process that I've told you right now is for people that cannot even afford, people like me that couldn't afford even the first semester's tuition fees. But there are some people that can, for example, and there are some people that can afford the entire tuition fees for the entire master's. You have every kind of people, right? For someone who can at least afford, say, $15,000 to $20,000, $10,000, depending on the university that you're applying to for the first semester, and they have, say, tried and they've exhausted this opportunity of like, reaching out to professors, they're not, say, no professor is looking for a research interest, or they give interviews, no professor accepts them. I would recommend, if they have the financial resources, that they go for the first semester in a university that has a lot of research in there, like in the department that's doing a lot of research. Pehle semester ki fees dein, they pay the first semester fees, and then they go. And then while they're studying in that first semester, they talk to professors, because you're in the university, you're in the department, you're in front of a professor. It's easier for him to select you for the next semester's teaching and research assistantships, as compared to if you're in Pakistan and that person has never seen you, for example, right? So I have had several friends, several people who could afford it. They paid the first semester's fees after they got admitted. They came into that university, and then while they were taking classes, they would go meet professors after that and ask them, hey, are you doing any research right now? Do you need any help? Is there something that I can help with? This is what I've done before that. It's much easier. It's like 50% less work if you can actually physically go talk to a professor and do that. So that's a really good question, and I would recommend that, doing that if you can afford the first semester's fees. The second question on YouTube Live would be, so this is a longer question. I'm not good in objective type tests. Even in ECAT, I scored very low. The reason behind this is I take too much time to understand what's being asked in the question. So GRE would be very tough for me. That is not true. You have not given the GRE. You don't know how it is. You're just assuming that because you had a tough time with ECAT, so you also have a tough time with GRE. That is not true. I am that example. I had a very tough time with ECAD. Just a heads up on that. I know practice can make me better, but the issue is I don't even have time to practice. Okay, as I have to manage freelance work and extracurricular activities like societies and the university. Right after graduation, I'll be busy in the job as I don't have any other option. I don't have financial support from the family. Is there something I can do? What if I would not be able to score well in the GRE as I'm already weak in such sort of tests where we have to manage time and use tricks to solve questions? So there's a lot in this question. One of the first things is you're involved in extracurricular activities like societies. If you're in your final year and you're involved in a lot of societies, I would not recommend that. I would say if you're pursuing a scholarship or even if you're pursuing a job, you should be in societies in your first year, in your second year, and maximum in your third year. If the society is not benefiting you in getting a job or getting a scholarship, you should not be spending your time, your valuable time in societies, because you're not really getting anything from them for your future career interests. That being said, I'm not saying leave them. All I'm saying is manage your time accordingly. Have your priorities set down. If the job's your priority, only do things that are going to focus you towards getting that job. If research and scholarships are your priority, then focus your time into doing that. So, and then I think I've answered that question about you had a hard time with ECAT. So you're thinking that you'll also have a hard time with GRE. That is not the case. Practice, you're saying, does make perfect, and it does. You're saying you don't even have the time. You have to make time. And if in your final year you don't have the time, it's fine. Give it a break. Focus on your education, focus on graduating with a good GPA, and then after that, focus on getting a job. Once you have a job, you spend a couple months with that job, you're getting some money coming in, save some money for your GRE test, and then start preparing part-time. Give it 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day after work, before work, and you have to manage your time accordingly with that. And I have friends who have given the GRE with their jobs. I have friends who have given GRE. I gave the GRE twice, after graduating and before graduating. So it's just about time management at the end of the day. So I guess there are more questions coming in. I'll start reading them after. Let's get to any Zoom questions that we have. If you guys have any questions, if you can raise your hands, if you have written anything down, I'd be more than happy to take them. G-Mom, what's your question?
Yeah, hi, I wanted to ask you, like, what is the importance of assistantship contract? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, what is the importance of an assistantship contract? Like, for instance, if your professor is willing to fund your entire MS degree, but he's not writing that on the contract, should we really go for that offer, or should we just leave that TA or RA position? What do you think?
So ideally, what you want to do is once you've talked to a professor, once he or she is interested in, funding your education, and say they're like, okay, we're going to fund you for a year, 2 semesters or 3 semesters, or even the entire program, because it's such a big decision to move from Pakistan and to go to a different country and to get funding from that professor. If you don't have anything in writing, if you don't have, and usually what universities do is they have contracts in place because they also want to bind you in that contract for that amount of time, because what they're basically doing is it's an employment opportunity. When you're doing research or when you're doing teaching assistantship, what happens is you're paid hourly, or so say, for example, in my research assistantship, I was working with the professor for 13 hours a week. There are people that work in research assistantships for 20 hours a week, and that's the maximum that you can work for on a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship. So basically what that professor is doing, he's saying, you come work on this research for me, or you come help me teach, you come check grade quizzes for me, you come help me with my teaching. In return, I would pay for your living expenses, and he would write that in the contract, $800, $1,000, $1,200 a month, whatever the university policy is. And then he would move on to saying, and then based on, that many hours a week, I'll also cover your tuition expense. So if you, in most universities, they have contracts in place to bind you as the students once you've accepted the offer. If a professor is being iffy about it, if he's not, giving any contract or anything as such. It's actually, I personally think it's risky, especially as a female. I would not recommend going with that opportunity. I would recommend asking a professor for a contract that you can hold him accountable to, and and he can hold you accountable to. Obviously, usme likha hota hai ki, you have to work for 20 hours per week on a research opportunity with this professor. In return, you will be compensated for this much amount of money. And if you have that contract, even if you move to the States or Canada or whatever country, if that professor messes up, and if that professor says, oh, sorry, I don't know you, I'm not going to fund you, and you've spent so much time and so much effort moving to that country, you have something in writing that's holding that professor accountable. So especially as a female, I would not recommend that. I would say have contracts in place. And for men as well, like personally, I had a contract with Auburn for the first 3 semesters, and a verbal promise from the professor that he'd also be looking to fund my final semester if it comes to that. So I hope that answered your question. Any other?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions in the Zoom session? Harsha, your hand raised. Yes.
So, am I audible? My question is basically related to teaching
Yes.
assistantship and research assistantship. So, like if you are going for research assistantship, you are sure that you're going to get admission, or you're going to apply for those selected universities from which you have received a reply from professors. Obviously, as far as I know, that there is application, or there is a fee for every university when you're applying for that. And reverse is the case when you are going for teaching assistantship. Like as far as I understood, that it would be totally random, that you will be going from random universities. So wouldn't it that your probability of getting admission in that university would be at stake? So
Right.
just
Right. That's a really good question. The way I think, don't focus on teaching assistantships, because that's purely based on luck. It depends on how many people in the cohort of applications that were accepted in the program tick that checkbox and say you are the highest GPA and the highest GRE score and the best profile in the people that check the checkbox for GTA, you'll get the GTA opportunity. So that's purely luck based. I would not recommend selecting universities based on GTA opportunities. I would say focus on selecting universities based on research opportunities. And when you're putting the application in, also check that GTA box. To come to your question about the application fees, that's a really good question. So application fees are not small. For every university, your application fees can range from $75 to $125 per application. And that's a lot of money. The way you go work around that, if you cannot pay that, for example, I couldn't pay that much amount of money for 10 different universities. You actually email the graduate program in the university and you tell them, hey, I'm looking to apply to your university. This is basically a small, brief description of my profile. I'm a graduate from this university in Pakistan, looking to apply in this cohort in fall, say 2020. Cannot pay for the application fee waiver. So this is something that you ask that university, and almost always the universities respond, and half the time they would give you an application fee waiver. So for example, 5 out of the 10 universities that I applied to, I had an application fee waiver. I did not have to pay anything for the application fees. They basically send you a promo code saying, hey, here you go, here's a promo code, you can use that for waiving your application fee. So that's a really good way of going about that. If you email the university graduate program, and their email is given like on the graduate page, on their master's page. So that's the way to work around on your application fees. GRE and TOEFL fees, that's also something, let me tell you about the TOEFL exam. In the US, if you're and they have the fund, if you're new, you don't have the funding for giving even the TOEFL exam, give you a letter saying their university basically is in English. And so they give fees back when I was a student 3 years ago. and you can take that letter and you can attach that instead of your TOEFL exam, and US schools accept that letter. I would still say if you have the financial capability of giving the TOEFL or the IELTS exam, it's better than the um, than that letter, because especially if you score a good score, it really puts your profile at a good place, especially for graduate teaching assistantships. If you have a good IELTS score or a comparatively good TOEFL score, they'd be like, okay, yeah, this person can speak English well, let's consider him. But even if you cannot, use that humanities department letter of the medium of communication in your university being English, and use that to in the place of your TOEFL or your IELTS exam. So I hope that answers your question. Is there anything that I missed, Harris, over there?
No, it's clear. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Any other questions from you guys right now? Before we move on to the YouTube questions, there are a lot coming in so far. I think if you don't have any Zoom questions, I'll move on to the YouTube questions again. So there's a question saying, do our research skills need to be strong for Fulbright scholarship, and we must have some past research work? For Fulbright scholarship, it's a cultural exchange program. You don't need research to apply for Fulbright or to even get selected in Fulbright. Because it's a cultural exchange program, their process is very different than general applications. You don't even have to fill the applications for schools. You just have to apply for the Fulbright scholarship, and they apply for schools yourselves. If you're very sure that you don't want to work in the US, you don't even want to have that as a degree or to your respective countries, and you're willing to do that, I'd say go apply for scholarship, especially if you cannot even, for your GRE or TOEFL exam. So I would recommend going for that Fulbright scholarship. But I would still say that even with Fulbright, I know a lot of people who come to Fulbright in the US. Once they're in the US and then they see F1 students working here, that's when they get a little disheartened. That's when they realize that they're missing out on a big opportunity. So I would recommend, keeping options open. But if you want to apply for Fulbright, that's fine too. As you said, we have to contact professors of respective research university and tell them about our research interest and the past research we have done on graduate level. When you're applying for Fulbright, you don't need to do any of that. The application process for Fulbright is different than the application process that I told you. The application process that I told you is the normal application process when you're applying for self-finance or when you're looking for a research or teaching assistantship. So it's the same in both cases. Is there any sort of commitment in Fulbright scholarship, like the time we will spend in USA? Yes, there is. We have to serve the same time in Pakistan as professor. No. In Pakistan, say if you're going from Pakistan on a Fulbright scholarship for master's, you have a commitment to spend at least 2 years working in Pakistan after your master's degree. If you've spent 5 years in your PhD program in the US, then I think it depends on what your contract is. So it's Fulbright, but there is a time that you have to come back and spend in your country, and you're not allowed to go back to the US or to that country in the meantime. There's a question, is there any, can we do any sort of job in USA right after scholarship? After your research or teaching assistantship, once that is over, once you have graduated from your school in the US, UK, or whatever university, you are not bound to the university anymore. You can stay in the US. You can work from 1 to 3 years in an OPT program, which is basically a work visa while you're on your student visa. Student visas are generally issued for 5 years. And say you're doing a 2 years master's, you get about 1 to 3 years of STEM OPT extension. And in that, you can work for a professional company and you can do a job, basically a full-time job after your funding. If you're on Fulbright, you cannot do that. You cannot even do an internship in your summers. You have to, spend the summers over there, and then after your Fulbright scholarship, you have to come back. Then the next question is, can we apply, about when after graduation can we apply for MS? There's no limit. I think in most schools, you can apply after you've graduated. You can apply in your third year, and you can also apply after a couple of years after you've graduated. There's no limit after graduation when you can apply for your master's. You can apply whenever. Just make sure that the timeline that you're using is you're using that timeline that I just told you guys. That is very important when you're applying. If you mess up the timeline, say you're giving your GRE in October, you cannot give the GRE in time. You cannot spend enough time on the GRE. You cannot spend enough time on the TOEFL exam. You can also not spend enough time preparing your application and your SOPs. So I would recommend respecting the timeline, because a lot of brilliant people with everything that's great, they end up, even like me, I had to take a gap year because I messed up on the timeline in my third year when I was applying for these schools. So I had to apply after graduating. So I would recommend, if you haven't started yet, start in June, start in May, June. If you haven't started yet, start in July. Don't go past July to start preparing for your GRE if you're looking to apply in December for the fall semester that year. What if we want to do out of field MS program? I have addressed that in this session before, so you can watch the video after that about a different session. Is teaching assistantship job enough to meet expenses, or do we have to live hand to mouth? Teaching and research assistantship, it depends. Every university and every department in the universities have their own policies about how much they're going to pay their employees. There's a minimum that they set. And usually, even if you're on that minimum, you can afford rent in that university and you can afford living expenses. That does not mean, you'll be driving a Rolls Royce or you'll be flying on jet planes with that teaching or research assistantship. You will be living as a student, but not you won't be living miserably. You'll have a place with an AC and general basic facilities, and you'll have your own place. You can have your own place. You can live in a combined setting, and you can obviously afford your own living expenses for food and some other stuff as well on teaching and research assistantships. And it varies from state to state. It also varies from department to department, university to university. Some of the last questions are: I have a relative and some seniors in London. Can this be of benefit for me in any way? Does it increase my chances? And actually, it doesn't increase your chances with regards to getting an admission or funding. What it does help you with is if you have any relative that are willing to let you stay at their place rent-free. Danish, if you can have please. Thank you. So it does they do let you stay. If they let you stay in their place rent free, what that means is even if you're funded from, say, a university in London, you can go stay at their place rent free, get free food from your aunt or uncle, whoever's there, have your laundry taken care of, for example, not have to pay for that. Have your dishes washed every single day by your aunt, or you can help them, or you can help her or him with that. The point is, it does help with the living part, but it does not help in getting admission or in getting funding in most cases. Okay, so we had that question, so that's good. Okay, let's come back to, I think I've answered most of the YouTube questions. If there are more, I'll take a quick look at the end as well. Let's go back to Zoom questions. If there are any Zoom questions that you guys have that you want to ask. Mia Sharif, you have a question right now?
Assalamu alaikum, Maaz bhai. I have a question regarding the research internship. I have seen an opening in a US university that is offering research internship, but they are not requiring any prior research experience. So how should I reach out to the professor or supervisor?
So what are you saying? Apne University देखी and they're offering research assistantship. Is that what you're saying? Can you repeat that?
They are offering internship, research internship.
Research internship. What is that? Is that a university?
A 12-week internship they're offering.
Where is it
for
at?
research purpose?
What country?
It's Georgia Tech. Yes.
Georgia Tech. Okay, and they're offering a 12 weeks research internship,
Yes.
right? Are they
Yes.
offering that in summer?
Yes.
Okay.
2022.
So I think if they're offering that in summer, because one thing that I think I should have told you guys, when you apply in December, of say you apply in the December in fall applications, some people think that you apply, the next day they send you a reply saying, oh, you've been accepted or you've not been accepted. That is not the case. When you apply, say in December, your admission or your acceptance or rejection comes in April or May in the next year, and you go for the fall admission in August of the next year. So for example, if you apply in December 2021, you will be going for your admission or for your school in August of 2022. So if there's a research internship that's being offered right now, say it starts in July in Georgia Tech, you're not in Georgia Tech right now, right? So even if you apply and they accept you, they're not going to give you admission. So
They are gonna start it in 2022. I have said it.
in 22, what month are they going to start it?
July.
July.
Next year.
Okay. So then you have time.
They are accepting the applications right now.
Okay. Is it only for people who are already in Georgia Tech, or is it for people?
No. They are accepting applications from worldwide students.
Okay, then that's good. Then that's a good opportunity. You should apply for that. Try to apply so that you can start your classes before July. Like I wouldn't want you to apply in the December intake. Like you apply in December, they give you admission and your first class is in August, and your internship is happening in July, because you're not going to be given a visa about 1 or 2 months before your classes start. So you need to make sure that your classes start before July. So I would recommend applying for their spring intake. And when you apply for their spring intake, I think their application should be open right now. If you have the GRE given, if you've given your TOEFL exam, whatever the requirements that they have, apply from their application. And then those classes would start in January 2022. And so you'd have to look for funding for the first semester, or you have to pay that out of your pocket. And then you can also apply for the research assistantship, internship that's happening in July.
I just wanted to ask you how I reach out to the professor.
So
what should I write him?
Is there any contact in that advertisement, how to apply?
Yes, there are topics and the supervisors are given in a Word file.
Then good. Then look at, it would also say what is the quality of work, or what is the kind of work that they're going to be doing, what field. It would be written down in there. So basically you have to tell them, hey, this is some, and again, don't lie. If you haven't done any work, don't make up things, because they're going to know. And that is just very bad if you end up making up things and lying in your resume or like in your SOP. But if you have done similar work and you're interested to do that work, then write about that, and then express your interest in working in that field, and send the application in via email. If you haven't done anything in that field, then I would recommend talking to a professor in the UET in that field and getting advice from him in how you should approach this.
Thank you, Maaz.
You're welcome. Do we have any other questions in the Zoom meeting? Herrera, do you have any questions, or Abdul Rafi? Do you have any questions from the Google Forms that you guys had?
All clear, thank you.
All right, that's good. Okay, I'm gonna, if you don't have any questions here, I'm gonna do a final sneak peek at the YouTube comments and see if there are any questions there that are worth answering. And then I'm gonna move, and then we're gonna move on towards ending the session. Abdul Rafi, you've raised your hand if you have any question.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
If I have a GRE score of 320, or you can say 330, with CGP of 3.1, can I get a fully funded scholarship with despite the fact that I have no research paper?
So I don't have a research paper. I do not have a research paper in my bachelor's. I had a GRE score of 318, and I had a CGPA of 3.1. And I was able.
I'm also doing bachelor's in civil engineering.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm also doing bachelor's in civil engineering.
Okay.
And my CGPA is also 3.1.
It is 3.1. Okay, that's good. So what I'm trying to tell you is, with a 3.1 GPA, even if you have a 310, for example, Auburn University that I went to, their minimum GRE cutoff is about 295 or 300. So obviously you don't want to have the minimum cutoff for the GRE. You want to be better than most applicants. US के जो मेरे class fellows थे, they had GRE scores of 300, 305, 307, 309. I had a GRE score of 318 because I worked hard on it. So I was able to excel over there and tell them, hey, like look, I'm better than the other applications in that. So a 320 score, a 330 score is really good. With a 3.1 GPA, you can apply to top schools in the US. And with a 330 GRE score, you can be considered, you're like in the top applicants for even Stanford and even like, best schools in the world. So that's a really good thing. If you don't have research paper, that's fine. Have you done any sort of research throughout your bachelor's, any research work with your professor? It could have been your final year project. It could have been before that. Have you done any sort of research work?
No, I have not done any research. I'm currently in sixth semester. Third year student.
Okay, then I would recommend you start doing research. You get your final year project as a research project, and I would recommend you start doing research with the professor as soon as possible. And then once you apply after 6 months or 8 months of research, you can use that research work, write about that in your statement of purpose, have a really good GRE score, and yes, it's very likely that you'll get funding from a professor. Because what you need to understand is you ask about the GPA and the GRE score. That's going to get you into a university. That's going to get you admitted. So for example, if I tell you my story, when I applied in December and January and February, in April, I got acceptances. And in April, I had acceptances. And in March, I had acceptances from places like Georgia Tech and other places. But I did not have any funding. So I have acceptances from all these schools, but they're like asking me to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't have that kind of money, right? So that is when I upped my game of emailing professors and reaching out to them as much as I could and asking them for funding. And some of them, if you really spend your time in crafting a good email, 70 to 80% of US professors respond. If you send a 1-line email or 3-line emails, they're not going to take you seriously because every single week they get hundreds of emails, right? So you want to make your email stand out. They're going to respond. If they don't have funding, they're just going to say, sorry, we don't have funding right now. Sometimes professors tell you, you can talk to this person, this professor, he has funding. So get that process going. That's the way to get funding. But so there are two processes: get admission, get funding. Funding is through emails and through your research. Admissions is through your GRE score, through your GPA cutoff, and through your research.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, that's good. Are there any other questions in the Zoom session? Otherwise, let's go to the YouTube live. Again, so Anas Azhar is asking, what if I don't have any sort of research throughout my degree? So let me answer that. I think I've covered that, but I'm going to talk about, and this is I think should cover everyone. What should you do in your first year to get master's funding scholarship, second year, third year, and final year? And I'm going to cover that really quick. If you're in your first year, focus on what you want to do. Do you want to do a job after graduating? Do you want to get a master's scholarship? What is something that excites you? What is something that you see yourself doing? This is an opportunity. Getting a really good job is an opportunity, but get yourself focused. Talk to as many people as you can. Talk to seniors, talk to professors, get yourself exposed to what are the opportunities that you have out there. And that's something that you got to do in your first year. From your second year, if you have decided that, you want to do get a master's scholarship or a PhD scholarship, I would recommend, if you're in your second year, you start talking to professors and you tell them that you're interested in doing research because you want to pursue a master's and PhD scholarship and you need research for that. So talk to professors and tell them, I want to do research with you. Is there any research project that you're doing, even in UET? And so I remember when I was doing research in my third year, the end of third year and final year, there was a student in his third or fourth semester that my professor attached with us because he was interested in his second year in doing research. So my professor was like, he doesn't really know much, but he's interested. I want to attach this person to you guys so that, he can learn from you guys. And that was really good. And he helped out a lot. So in your second year, start doing that. Reach out to professors, get yourself involved in research. In your summer vacation, in your second year, I would recommend preparing and giving the first GRE attempt. In your second year, after your second year's vacation, summer vacation, give the first GRE attempt. Your GRE score lasts for 5 years. if you fail, or you don't fail GRE scores, if you get a low score, say you get a 295 or 280, it does not matter, because you can give another try in your third year. And even if you've given the GRE 10 times, you can take the best score and you can send it to the university, and the university will not know whether you've given it 10 times or you've given it once. So have that cleared out. ठीक है, तो I would recommend as soon as you can in your second year's vacation, start preparing, give the GRE. In your third year, if you already have a good GRE score in your second year, that's good. If you don't, then in your third year, that's the ideal time that you want to apply. So everyone in their third year should be doing a couple of things. One, they should be working on a research project, any research project with seniors or with a professor on the part-time with their studies. Two, they should be focusing on making sure that they give the GRE in their summer vacations. So as soon as you graduate, as soon as you're done with your 6th semester, start preparing for the GRE, give the GRE exam by, as I said before, August or the end of September. Give the GRE exam, get a good score. As soon as your university starts in August, start your university. Now, TOEFL exam and IELTS exams are not hard. Go through that process. The reason I'm saying is, if you apply in your third year for school, say you did apply in your third year summer vacation, and you apply in December in your final year, the acceptance and when you'll go attend classes for your master's would be in August the next year. So that will be after you finished your fourth year. So that's the way you don't have to take a gap year in your education if you want to complete your master's and complete your bachelor's degree, complete your undergraduate degree, and go straight for a master's without any gap year. Apply at the end of your third year, give the GRE, TOEFL, and go through the process that I said. If you're already in your fourth year and you haven't applied, it's fine. But now you should focus on two things. As early as you can, attach yourself with the professor. Does not matter if it's not related to your final year project. Attach yourself with the professor on the part-time, on the side. Give 1 to 2 hours every day. Start doing research with him so that your research profile starts building and you have something to say in your statement of purpose. And then start, the timeline that I told you. Give the GRE, you can go in the next year after that. So basically that's the way. If you're in your final year already, you probably will have to give a gap year like I did. I graduated in August, July to November. November is when your graduation is. July and August is when your thesis ends. That's when I graduated in 2018. I went for a master's in May of 2019 for their summer intake. So in that process, there was a hefty amount of time, about 9 months. In that 9 months, I, gave my GRE, did my internship, did other things, applied to professors. So there's a lot that you can do in those 8 to 9 months to spend your time effectively, even with the gap year. And I was very afraid of taking a gap year, but honestly, the gap year was one of the best things that could have happened to me because I was more productive in my gap year than I was in my university life. While my friends who had graduated from university, they were, sitting around thinking, okay, what to do, where to apply, kya job karni hai. I was focused. I knew as soon as I graduated the next day, I was going to start preparing for the GRE. I did not waste any time, and that really helped me out in the long run. So I hope that answers any questions about if I'm in my first year, mujhe kya karna chahiye, second year, mujhe kya karna chahiye, third year, mujhe kya karna chahiye. And obviously with all that, keep yourself healthy, be in extracurriculars as much as you can, but have yourself focused on the priorities for your future, be it master's, be it job, be it starting a business, whatever you want to do, be focused and take steps for that. What is expected cutoff GPA? For my session, there's no cutoff GPA for my session. I did not invite people based on GPA. And then there are some other questions about, I think I covered the research one. Semesters in UK start from January. Should I go there and send finance or wait and try for scholarships? Does having a gap year matter? Having a gap year does not matter. As I said, it's one of the best things that could have happened to me. Semesters in UK start from January. Should I go there and self-finance or wait and try for scholarships? It depends on you. If you can give the first semester's fees, I would recommend give that. But if you cannot, then wait and try your best for scholarships and aim for that. So I think I've covered all of the YouTube live questions that were there, or most of them at least, the relevant ones. If you guys don't have any questions, I think I've covered most of the Zoom session questions as well. I'd like to thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your time on a Saturday night. I appreciate you all being here. And yeah, thank you so much. And I hope you guys have a wonderful night and have a wonderful rest of your day. If you do want to reach out to me for guidance or for any other things, you can contact me via email. I try to check it regularly, and you can email me at Maaz Khan, which is MAAZKHAN 96 @gmail.com. That's Maaz Khan, MAAZKHAN 96 @gmail.com. So you can contact me there, send me an email if you need any guidance, any help, and whenever I have time, I'll take a look and help you guys out. But with that, take care. I'm going to be ending the YouTube live as well, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your night.